On the screen, a blonde baddie and a big black trainer are deeply engrossed in a jujutsu grappling session. The woman is putting in maximum effort, letting out heavy sweats as she is put in a chokehold by her partner, completely overwhelmed by how effective this technique is. But this intense lesson isn't happening in real life for our main character. Instead, we see a disgusting, filthy 29-year-old young man, Junhyun, lying flat on his back on a mattress, gasping for air. It turns out Junhyun has completely messed up his life with a heavy addiction to his solo hand grip training, aiming to complete at least one hand endurance workout per day. He lies on his floor mattress, gripping a workout tool, and feverishly working through a forearm session while staring at his laptop. This guy is basically living like a useless carp, completely unemployed and wasting away his miserable days in a messy room next to his fridge and washing machine. As he watches the blonde athlete in the video push through her endurance training on his screen, he reflects on his miserable life, realizing that the only thing he has actually managed to acquire over the years is this massive video file and its specific item number. He even confesses to himself that he used to look up to professional male trainers in these videos, seriously wishing he could become one himself someday. With a heavy sigh, our protagonist laments the pathetic state of his current existence, feeling like he is about to go completely crazy. Yet, as he continues to watch the video, he can't help but admire the sheer quality of the performance. He grits his teeth, reaching the absolute muscle limit of his own grip training session, and prepares to finish his wrist curl practice. Grabbing a roll of toilet paper, he wonders why his body produced so much sweat today, feeling incredibly irritated by the cleanup he now has to do. On his hands and knees, he wipes down the mattress, complaining about the sheer pointlessness of wasting such precious time in such a useless, lonely place. He laments the sad reality that he has never even had a real partner to train with. Sitting back with a defeated sigh, he looks at the crumpled balls of tissue with body sweat on the floor, feeling completely empty inside. He stares longingly at his laptop screen, where the conditioning session is still playing, realizing that his deep craving for conditioning training is not something that can ever be satisfied by simply watching training videos. He desperately wants to experience what real conditioning training feels like with a real partner, something he can feel with his own body. But with his 30th birthday fast approaching, he knows that most of his peers have already experienced relationships and active lifestyles. To make matters worse, Junhyun remembers his friend Min Chan, who managed to marry a famous model and is now living an incredibly fulfilling, happy life, leaving our lonely protagonist further behind in the dust. Now his self-pity deepens as he thinks about his other friend, Young Jun, who has always been incredibly wealthy and constantly posts pictures on social media showing off the various women he meets at clubs. This wealthy young man seems to be constantly jumping from one companion to the next, leaving our protagonist feeling completely left behind. Holding a canned drink in his hand, this lonely guy sits on his mattress, staring at these posts on his phone and drowning in overwhelming jealousy. Convinced that these successful guys are probably enjoying as much high-intensity training as they want at this very moment. With a deep, heavy sigh, Junhyun sits in his cramped room and laments his own miserable situation, realizing that while his peers are out living their best lives, he is stuck alone in a shabby one-room apartment, engaging in a lonely self-training routine. But just as he is wallowing in his own self-pity, his phone suddenly starts ringing loudly, catching him completely off guard. Looking down at the screen in utter shock, he wonders who could possibly be calling him at a time like this, only for his heart to skip a beat when he sees the caller ID is none other than Kim Seo-ah. Reflecting on the old saying that even the most unfortunate people eventually have their lucky days, Junhyun dresses up in a nice blazer and heads out to the bustling streets, hoping that today might finally be his day. Clutched by intense nervousness, he desperately tries to calm his racing heart as he waits outside a restaurant. Checking his messages, he sees a text from the person he has been longing to see the most, letting him know that she is almost at their meeting spot. Kim Seo-ah is officially just a female friend, but Junhyun has harbored a massive crush on her for the longest time. To his absolute delight, this gorgeous girl actually took the initiative to contact this boy first, asking him to meet up. He looks at her picture on his phone, completely mesmerized by how much prettier she has become since they last met. Our delusional idiot reasons that there is absolutely no way a girl would invite a guy out first without a very specific, romantic reason, convincing himself that she must have finally gathered the courage to confess her feelings to him today. Getting carried away by his own sussy imagination, he impatiently wonders when she will arrive, his grin widening as he lets his thoughts run wild with the hope that today might finally be the day he gets to participate in a real, partner-based fitness conditioning session. Just thinking about the possibility of endurance training gets our hopeless hero completely enraptured. Even though he knows he might be letting his imagination run a bit too sussy from the very beginning, Junhyun can't help but hope that today is finally his lucky day. But while he stands on the street lost in his own fantasy, a beautiful woman in a form-fitting white jacket sneaks up right behind him. With a sudden playful shout, she completely startles the poor guy, causing him to gasp in sheer shock. Turning around with a bright red blush, he looks at her in utter disbelief as she warmly greets him. Apologizing for making him wait, she explains that she was late because she couldn't find a parking spot. As she leans in, noting that it has been a long time since they last saw each other, our protagonist is completely starstruck and stands frozen, unable to form a coherent sentence. Looking at the gorgeous Kim Seo-ah, his heart begins to beat uncontrollably. When she warmly asks how he has been, he finds himself screaming internally, completely overwhelmed by how much prettier she has become, and has absolutely no idea how to handle himself. Deciding to move the conversation indoors, they head into a local pub called Wari Wari to grab a drink. Sitting across from him, she remarks on how much he seems to have changed, pointing out that his body seems to be in much better shape, and that he even looks taller. She admits she almost didn't recognize him at first, prompting our embarrassed protagonist to nervously laugh it off and play it cool. The compliments keep rolling in as she tells him he has become even cooler, while he bashfully returns the compliment, telling her she has also become much prettier. Hearing this absolute joker decides that this is the ultimate confirmation of his theories, concluding that she definitely met up with him to confess her love. She goes on to mention that it has been about 6 to 7 years since they last saw each other, recalling that their last meeting was right after he was discharged from the military. He silently thanks the heavens for throwing him such a miraculous stroke of luck, realizing that if a girl like Seo-ah wants to be with him, he is absolutely all for it. As she casually changes the subject to ask if Junhyun is still in touch with their friends, Min-chan and Young-jun, our protagonist's mind completely drifts away, utterly distracted by her incredible figure. Soon enough, his thoughts spiral into a wild daydream about guiding her through an intense conditioning and grip training session. In this ridiculously vivid fantasy, he imagines participating in a hands-on, high-intensity training session where he is free to practice his grip training however he wants, convinced that a workout with someone of her incredible caliber would yield the most rewarding results. But back in the cold, harsh reality, he suddenly starts sweating and shaking, silently screaming to himself how incredibly worked up he is just thinking about it. His bizarre, tense posture immediately catches Seo-ah's attention, and she looks at him with a thoroughly puzzled expression, asking why he is acting so strange. He quickly tries to play it cool, stammering out that it is absolutely nothing. Trying to gather his scattered thoughts, this guy tells himself to calm down, remaining absolutely certain that she is about to confess her feelings to him. Clutching his beer glass, he decides to subtly fish for the main topic, pointing out that she probably had a very special reason for contacting him out of the blue. He nervously asks if she has something important to tell him, only to be met with a sussy, knowing smirk on her face. She playfully teases him, asking why he is rushing things when she was planning to build up to it slowly. Believing his victory is finally secured, he impatiently urges her in his mind to just spit it out already and confess that she wants to go out with him, ready to tell her that he likes her too. However, his illusions are instantly shattered when she drops a massive bombshell, revealing that she actually works at an insurance company. He stands completely frozen in absolute disbelief, barely processing her words as she sighs, explaining how hard it is to bring this up with friends who might easily misunderstand her motives. She continues to explain that she only wanted to recommend a fantastic deal to her circle, but because it is technically business, everyone else has been highly reluctant. In his head, our poor monkey is desperately pleading that this cannot possibly be the reason she called him out today. But the nightmare is only getting started. Taking his previous advice to be completely honest, she enthusiastically reaches out to explain that a highly beneficial new insurance plan has just been released. While he maintains a painfully forced, sweating smile and begs her in his mind not to do this to him, she sweetly asks if he wants to learn more about the details. Leaning forward with a cute, pleading gaze, she leaves him completely helpless, muttering a silent curse at his own terrible luck. Cut to later that evening outside on the street. Having actually signed the papers, Junhyun stands defeated next to her luxury car while she happily thanks him, declaring that this is exactly why they are such amazing friends. She assures him one last time that this plan is actually far more beneficial to him than it is to her. Looking completely broken and holding his brand new insurance binder, he weakly thanks her for the recommendation, only for her to coolly put on her sunglasses, bid him farewell, and drive away, leaving him alone in the dark. Standing alone outside a McDonald's, our defeated protagonist can only watch as the car drives away, leaving him in the dark. Clutching the useless insurance folder tightly under his arm, he can't help but mutter a bitter, frustrated curse at her departure, feeling completely cheated and incredibly foolish. Junhyun trudges away into the night, his heavy footsteps leading him onto a massive bridge overlooking the quiet city river. Walking along the pedestrian path, he reflects on how his supposed stroke of good luck turned out to be an absolute disaster. He realizes that instead of receiving a confession, he got talked into signing a monthly insurance deal costing 30 to 50,000 won. He bitterly questions why she would target a penniless guy like him just to meet a sales quota. His anger quickly turns inward, and he sighs as he admits to himself that he is the real idiot for actually listening to her pitch and signing the contract. Staring down at his reflection, he realizes just how pathetic his life has truly become, briefly wondering if it might be better to just throw it all away. However, he quickly dismisses the dark thought, reasoning that such an extreme measure is only meaningful when there is someone in your life who will actually mourn and cry over your absence. For a useless carp like him, Junhyun knows that no one would even notice his disappearance, and doing something reckless would only cause more trouble than it is worth. Trying to console himself with the thought that there are definitely people out there who have things much worse than he does, his self-pity is suddenly cut short. Looking further down the railing, his eyes widen in absolute shock as he spots a young woman in a blue jacket standing directly on the outer ledge of the bridge, staring down at the dark water below. Panic immediately sets in, and our protagonist yells out to get her attention, telling her that she absolutely cannot do this. Gesturing frantically for her to step back to safety, he desperately begs her to stay exactly where she is. The young woman slowly turns her head, looking back at him with a remarkably calm, somber gaze. She quietly tells him to stay back, a gentle, sad smile appearing on her face as she whispers for him to just stay where he is, right before her fingers slowly let go of the metal railing. In a split second, the young man's eyes widen in absolute horror as the young woman lets go and falls backward, plummeting through the air toward the cold water below. Leaning over the edge in sheer panic, our boy screams out in a desperate attempt to stop her, but it is already too late. He can only watch as she plunges into the river, a loud splash echoing through the dark night. Trembling uncontrollably as he grips the metal railing, Junhyun completely freezes up, unable to believe what has just unfolded right in front of his eyes. Junhyun frantically questions whether this nightmare is actually real, his mind racing as he tries to figure out what he should do, or if there is even anything a useless guy like him can do in such a desperate situation. In that hopeless moment, a flurry of thoughts runs through his head, but his instincts suddenly take over. Perhaps because he has completely lost his sanity, Junhyun sheds his jacket without a single second of hesitation, climbs right over the safety railing, and jumps headfirst into the abyss after her. Hurling himself from the massive bridge, the screaming protagonist plunges through the air, letting out a wild, terrified yell as he falls toward the dark water to try and save her. After pulling her from the dark water, Junhyun drags her onto the riverbank, gasping heavily for breath. He frantically shakes the unconscious woman's shoulder, trying to wake her up and begging her to open her eyes. Staring down at her pale, unresponsive face, he nervously wonders if she has already passed away. Desperate for any sign of life, he leans down and presses his ear against her heart, letting out a massive sigh of relief when he hears her heart still beating steadily. As she lies there shivering, he is deeply perplexed, wondering what could have possibly driven this stranger to do something so incredibly extreme. Realizing she needs immediate professional help, he quickly pulls out his phone to call for an ambulance. However, his relief is instantly cut short when he taps the screen. Realizing in absolute panic that his phone has died at the worst possible moment, he holds his face in his hands, feeling like he is about to lose his mind as the gravity of the situation sinks in. Looking around the empty bridge steps, he realizes there is absolutely nobody around to help them. To make matters worse, both of their clothes are completely soaked, and he can feel their body temperatures starting to drop rapidly in the cold night air. Shivering uncontrollably, he realizes that if they stay out here like this, they both might die of hypothermia. He grits his teeth, realizing that the closest warm shelter from here is his own apartment. Dragging himself and the unconscious stranger back to his place, his heavy gasps echo through his small kitchen as he struggles to carry her on his back. With a pained groan, he finally makes it into his room and gently lays her down onto his floor mattress. Collapsing onto the floor beside her, he lets out an exhausted sigh, incredibly relieved that they barely made it back alive. He leans over her, shaking her gently and begging her to wake up, but she remains completely unresponsive. Deciding that he must warm her up first, he grabs a dry blanket and prepares to cover her with it. But as he pulls the blanket over her shivering body, she suddenly lets out a weak, pained groan, catching him completely off guard. The unconscious woman weakly groans that it hurts, her breathing shallow and ragged. Our young protagonist immediately realizes how critical the situation is, noticing that her fever is rapidly getting worse when he places his hand on her forehead. He realizes that wrapping her in a warm blanket while she is still wearing soaking wet clothes would only make her condition worse. Swallowing his nervousness, he makes the difficult decision to remove her wet outer jackets, immediately reacting in complete shock once the task is done. She is left lying in her jacket, shivering heavily from her fever. Though this is his very first time seeing a woman in person, he can't help but admire her incredible physical conditioning. But as he looks closer, his eyes widen in surprise as he notices bright red spots suddenly appearing on her shoulders. This triggers a memory, reminding him of a unique conditioning ability he possesses that others do not. He is able to see special red spots on people's bodies that indicate areas of physical distress. He recalls his school days when he would use this ability to target those specific spots, prompting the school delinquents to praise his unbelievable muscle-releasing techniques. While his peers fought over who would get his targeted physical therapy sessions next, his success had a bitter side effect. Because he was so good at it, he unfortunately ended up becoming their personal massage servant all throughout his school years. Bringing his mind back to the present, he looks at the red spots on her shoulders, realizing that just like back then, targeting these specific pressure points might be the key to saving her. Positioning himself behind her, he prepares to administer a specialized healing routine, confident that this muscle conditioning session will definitely help her recover. With absolute focus, he firmly presses his thumbs into the glowing red spots to begin his targeted therapy. As he begins the targeted physical therapy on her shoulders, she lets out a soft sigh of relief. The sudden sound completely startles Junhyun, but his focus returns as he notices the glowing red spots on her skin are actually starting to fade. He happily realizes that his treatment is definitely having a positive effect on her body. Deciding to continue the treatment, he targets the next set of spots located near her hands. As he applies firm pressure, she continues to make soft vocal reactions, clearly feeling the intense physical pressure of this precision grip training session as his hands work through the deep muscle tension. Sweating from the sheer effort, Junhyun tells himself that even though this is purely a medical massage, he must push through and begs her in his mind to hold on just a little longer. To get a better angle and maximize the pressure, he carefully mounts the mattress, straddling her legs, and promises that he will have her cured in no time. Panting heavily, he stays positioned over her torso, pushing through her deep muscle tension. To his great relief, he notices that the red spots on her body are almost completely gone. He gently massages her lower abdomen to finish the upper body routine, and when he checks her forehead once more, he is thrilled to realize that her fever is finally starting to drop. With the upper body conditioning successfully completed, he prepares to move on to the next step of the treatment. Looking down, he spots more glowing red areas. Just as he prepares to apply pressure, the unconscious woman slowly begins to flutter her eyes open. The unconscious woman lets out a soft sound, whispering that the treatment feels incredibly good. Hearing her vocal reaction completely flusters Junhyun, catching him off guard. Suddenly, she bolts upright on the mattress, startling him so badly that he lets out a terrified yelp. Now awake, she sits facing him in her jacket, and an awkward, heavy silence falls over the entire room as they stare at each other. Desperate to break the ice, he nervously begins to speak, realizing that she might completely misunderstand the situation she has just woken up to. He frantically waves his hands to explain that his intentions were purely medical and that he was only trying to cure her fever. But before he can even finish his explanation, she suddenly reaches out and grabs him by the hand, pulling him close and cutting him off, showing an unexpected endurance training trick. As Junhyun is pulled inside her fridge, his heart races with panic, leaving him completely unsure of what to do, as he wonders if he should just let this beautiful stranger show him beautiful tricks. But before he can make sense of his racing thoughts, the young woman's eyes snap wide open, and she suddenly pushes him back by the neck, halting their contact in an instant. Looking completely dazed, Jin Ah-young weakly asks why he is stopping, mumbling in her confusion that she could easily keep going with this intense conditioning session. Junhyun stands frozen and deeply embarrassed, but the moment of confusion quickly passes as Ah-young finally takes a proper look at his face. Panting heavily, she blushes deeply and demands to know exactly who he is. Before he can even begin to explain himself, the terrifying reality of the situation hits her, and she lets out a loud, piercing scream that echoes far outside into the quiet night. Scrambling backward to the edge of the mattress, Ah-young trembles with fear and fiercely warns him not to come any closer, demanding to know what kind of person he is. Junhyun frantically waves his hands in the air, pleading with her to remain calm. He gestures toward her hands and gently suggests that she should first put down the object she is holding before they try to talk. Looking down in confusion, she realizes she has instinctively grabbed a peculiar, plastic massage tool to defend herself. Mortified and furious, she immediately hurls the workout tool straight at his head, shouting at him to get away from her and calling him a sick bastard as she demands to know where on earth he has brought her. Junhyun barely manages to block the flying object, raising his voice to command her to calm down so he can finally explain the entire situation. The sudden authority in his voice causes her to freeze, and she looks at him with wide, quiet eyes. As a heavy silence falls over the room, she looks down and wraps her arms around herself as the memories of her desperate leap from the bridge slowly flood back, prompting her to softly admit that she finally remembers what happened. Now wrapped safely in a dry gray blanket, Ah-young sits quietly against the wall, while Junhyun sits cross-legged on the floor at a respectful distance. He gently tells her that he now understands the gravity of her situation, explaining that while he might not know the reasons behind her extreme actions, he simply could not stand by and let her die. He describes how his phone was completely ruined by the river water, making it impossible to call an ambulance, and explains that with both of them soaking wet in the freezing cold, he had no choice but to bring her to his nearby apartment to save them from hypothermia. With earnest sincerity, Junhyun assures her that he did absolutely nothing sussy, explaining that her wet jackets had to be removed to manage the sudden, dangerous fever that took hold of her. He gently concludes by advising her that she is still far too young to make such a reckless decision with her life, hoping his words will bring her some comfort after such a terrifying night. As she sits on the mattress, Jin Ah-young gently touches her forehead and realizes with a sigh of relief that her fever has definitely broken, and even her heavy hangover is completely gone, leaving her head feeling remarkably refreshed. Looking down, she begins to reflect on the hazy moments when she was drifting in and out of consciousness, quietly acknowledging to herself that despite being half asleep, the physical treatment she received from Junhyun actually felt incredibly good. With a deep blush spreading across her cheeks, she looks up and hesitantly asks him if he could possibly perform that same routine on her just one more time. Completely stunned by her sudden request, Junhyun blinks in surprise and stammers as he asks her what exactly she wants him to do. Turning her head slightly in embarrassment, Ah-young clarifies that she is talking about what he did earlier, referring to his specialized therapy session. The realization immediately clicks for Junhyun, and his mind begins to race as he wonders what is going on with this woman, questioning if she really enjoyed his unique conditioning style that much. Sensing a rare opportunity, he swallows his nervousness and wonders if he should try his luck, quickly speaking up to say that he can absolutely do it, though he hopes she won't take his words the wrong way. Fidgeting nervously with his hands, he explains to her that in order to receive a proper, full-body training session, she will need to wear her remaining jackets. To his absolute astonishment, Ah-young calmly cuts him off and says she already knows what needs to be done. Without a single moment of hesitation, she lets the blanket slide off her shoulders, kneeling directly in front of him on the mattress. As Junhyun stares in wide-eyed shock, she assures him that she won't misunderstand his intentions, so he shouldn't worry. Blushing intensely, she crosses her arms and softly asks if he can do the training properly for her this time, casually wearing her jacket and placing it on the floor right before his eyes. Junhyun's heart beats wildly against his chest as he stares down in utter disbelief, reflecting on how he never actually expected his nervous proposal to work. Feeling completely overwhelmed by the sudden turn of events, he desperately tries to maintain his professionalism, frantically stammering that she really must not misinterpret his actions. As his panic peaks, he holds up his hands and pleads with her to wait and stop, but a heavily blushing Ah-young simply pants softly, looking up at him while whispering that this is already more than enough for them to begin their proper training session. Although Junhyun eagerly suggests that continuing their conditioning session will make her feel even better, Jin Ah-young gently declines, assuring him that she has already had plenty of treatment. Fully dressed once again, in her white shirt and blue jacket, Ah-young turns to him and warmly expresses her gratitude for his kind hospitality before abruptly announcing her intention to head home. Junhyun is caught completely off guard by her sudden decision, frantically raising his hands and questioning why she would want to venture out at such a late hour. He desperately tries to persuade her to stay, suggesting that it would be much safer to rest a bit longer and leave the next morning instead. Ignoring his protests, Ah-young reaches for the doorknob but pauses for a brief moment, turning back to look at him as a wave of confusion washes over his face. She pulls out a small blue business card, quietly stating that she has one last thing to give him before she goes. With a deep blush spreading across her face, she shyly holds out the card and asks him to give her a call later if he is comfortable doing so. Before Junhyun can even gather his thoughts, she steps out of the apartment and lets the door click shut, leaving him standing completely alone in the middle of his quiet room. He gazes down at the card in his hand, which prominently displays the name Happy Aesthetic, utterly perplexed, as he wonders what this mysterious card is supposed to mean. A few days later, Junhyun finds himself walking along the bustling city streets, scratching his head in deep thought as he tries to navigate his way. He eventually stops right outside a commercial building and looks up, his eyes locking onto a sleek sign that reads, Happy Aesthetic. Standing at the entrance with a mixture of curiosity and nervousness, he quietly realizes that he has finally arrived at the location printed on her card. Upon entering the bright and modern interior of Happy Aesthetic, Junhyun is immediately greeted by the female receptionist, who asks to confirm if he is indeed Kang Junhyun. She casually points out that their shop exclusively caters to female clients, adding that his job interview will commence as soon as the owner arrives in just a short moment. This unexpected revelation leaves Junhyun completely bewildered, as he frantically tries to understand why this woman is talking about an interview. Hoping to clear up the confusion, he nervously scratches his head and explains that he actually came to meet a specific woman whom he had met just the day before. Rather than helping, the receptionist leans over the counter to closely inspect him, dryly observing that he does not look like a professional therapist at all. She openly wonders what their owner could have possibly heard about him to immediately schedule an interview. Before Junhyun can make sense of his strange situation, a towering, incredibly muscular bald man wearing dark sunglasses and a thick beard strides into the lobby, startling Junhyun half to death. The intimidating man apologizes for his lateness due to a traffic delay and warmly introduces himself as Choi Won-jae, the owner of Happy Aesthetic. Looking at this massive figure, Junhyun screams internally, questioning whether this man is truly a business owner or actually a high-ranking mob boss. Won-jae quickly explains that a woman named Jin Ah-young had contacted him late the previous night, which prompts Junhyun to ask who exactly he is talking about. Surprised by his ignorance, the owner explains that Ah-young had spoken highly of his incredible massage skills. Hearing this, Junhyun finally realizes that the mysterious stranger he rescued from the river is named Jin Ah-young. Before he can ask any further questions, Won-jae abruptly cuts him off and slides off his shirt, announcing that it is time to begin the evaluation and commanding Junhyun to massage his back. Although Junhyun is totally taken aback by this sudden request, the owner confidently explains that having worked in the beauty and massage industry for nearly 20 years, he can easily gauge a therapist's skill level from touch alone, encouraging him to simply relax and perform his routine. Junhyun desperately tries to protest that he never came here for a job, but his voice fades as he looks at the massive man sitting before him. Despite Won-jae's incredibly powerful and muscular physique, Junhyun's unique conditioning vision suddenly kicks in, and he stands frozen as glowing red distress spots begin to light up across the owner's neck, shoulders, and lower back. Junhyun realizes there is no helping his current situation and decides to perform his usual routine first. He gently places his hands on Choi Won-jae's neck and starts applying firm pressure, slowly working his deep tissue technique down the owner's massive, muscular back. As the physical therapy continues, Won-jae's eyes snap wide open behind his sunglasses in absolute shock, internally gasping as he feels the immediate, incredible impact of the touch. Suddenly, the owner shouts for Junhyun to stop because that is more than enough, bolting upright from his seat in an instant. Completely startled, Junhyun wonders what is wrong since he barely even started the routine, nervously scratching his head as he asks if his technique was actually that bad. Blushing deeply, Won-jae turns around and confesses that he has recently been suffering from a severe mana energy blockage, which had left him completely unable to participate in any partner-based endurance training sessions with his wife. However, he joyfully reveals that the very moment he felt Junhyun's hands, his deep mana energy blockages were completely cleared, leaving him feeling unbelievably healthy and energetic once again. Shouting that he needs to rush home right this second to start a full-body conditioning session with his wife, the ecstatic owner sprints out of the room. Junhyun stands alone, completely dumbfounded by the bizarre turn of events, hearing the front door slam shut as the owner yells for his wife to wait for him, leaving our protagonist wondering what is supposed to happen to him now.